to kick things off, Alex Karp, co-founder and CEO of Palantir Technologies, Tai Chi master, cross-country skier. Alex Karp, welcome to Axios House. So appreciate it. I understand you already took a quick ski run close to here. How are the conditions?
They're very good, or they were yesterday. For Classic, you went consistent cold, and it was consistently cold. And I was very happy.
So, Alex, to walk the promenade here in Davos, Switzerland, you wouldn't know it, but AI isn't new, and Palantir has been there for a long time. Who are going to be the winners and losers now that there is an obvious AI revolution that's going to dominate our life and work?
Well, the real source of instability, I think, in the world right now, the economic instability, is America. Almost all the real providers, I'm sure there are exceptions, almost all the companies that are adopting AI not as like a form of self-pleasuring, but as an operational use case.
Wait, self-pleasuring?
All are actually in America, and so you have this huge, and this is even more true on the battlefield. So you have a huge disjunction where, I spent half my life in Europe. I wrote my PhD in German. On my father's side, they were Altman, and for 900 years. You have this huge disjunction. So the disjunction in America is a lot of the GDP growth is going to be powered by software that works. Software is transformational. What we call AI, not just large language models, and your ability to implement them. And that's going to fall probably to a very, very small number of people. So a lot of GDP growth, very small number of people profit. So that leads to dislocations in the U.S. The dislocation, I'm in favor of fighting and unifying the West. The dislocation between America and Europe is the startup scene here is anemic, and the real growth and providers are in America. There's another thing which is particularly disadvantageous, which is the idea, not throwing shade on any startups, but most people who actually make money on AI are going to already be established people implementing AI in various forms. So strong military gets stronger, strong software companies get stronger, people who are in a weaker position get much weaker. So that's then on the battlefield. There's these stats that are crazy. 84% of the top 50 tech companies in the world are American. That's okay. Imagine what that's going to be in 10 years. It's going to be 90%, 95%.
And why is that?
You know, the thing that, and I've been yelling, almost every European leader you've ever met, I've yelled at in private. And I've said the same thing over and over again. You're modeling this as intelligence. I spent my graduate school in Germany. French people think I speak French. It's much more like building a rock band. Like, this is a band thing. And you have to, it's just, if you're building a rock band and the rock band happens to produce technology, America's very good at building rock bands. And part of it is you need a narrative. Part of it is, there's a religious element. We're Calvinists. We see a unification of good and success. My Lutheran brethren, success is obviously not linked to you've done something right. So
you're saying the Europeans are the Lutherans?
Well, Germanic, there's Lutherans, but Germanic culture is basically Lutheran. We have the Swiss, it's a huge in contradistinction. It's a Calvinist culture. Basically, we have the Dutch, they're Calvinists. But as a generalization, we associate moral integrity and winning as being intertwined. We're very good at playing in groups, we're not as focused on the person is smarter and stealing, not sharing information. And then we're very focused. For 10 years, people would yell at us at Palantir, "You're not a company, you're a cult." And what I would throw back at companies now is, "You're not a cult." We are believers. We have these products we've built that are now decisive on the battlefield. Our U.S. commercial product is inarguably the most successful actual implementation of these things. We have a terrible sales force. We're growing so much. We have someone here. I was like, "Sorry, you can't leave America anymore." We have to rebuild the whole company. He's really upset because he wants to ski and meet nice people. Sorry. And you can do it in America. But it's like it, and then it's compounding this like thing, like we're always critiqued for being artificial, but you could also say we're adaptive. So you try 50 things, they work, they move on. It compounds into GDP advantage. If you just rough math, these are just rough math numbers, but US GDP grew 60%. California GDP, like 61 to 91 was like 160% rough numbers, 110% in the last 30 years. You could see California's GDP going up to 200%. Of course, it only goes to a small number of people. What's going to happen in France and Germany? Like, how are you going to support the education I had in Germany with 20%, 10% GDP growth? And you just like, and then on the military front, we've got to start actually working together. Like, we have all these things. Why aren't we sharing them? Why can't they be shared? So it's just this massive, massive dislocation after this. But it is really, the experience of dislocation is going to be very different for US, very different from here. Now, the purpose of Palantir is to fight for the West. And so I really want Europe to get its act together. But part of getting its act together is we can't just continue lying, half lies, halblugen. It's like we have to actually talk about these issues and argue with each other, as opposed to, yes, we all believe I believe in climate, I believe in fighting xenophobia. Okay, we all believe in this. Now, can we talk about some things we disagree on? Like, and like really talk about what is it going to mean when America has all the GDP growth? And it's like, yes, sure, we have these crazy political situation, couldn't be crazier. But crazy political situation and GDP growth, that's much better than nice political situation and no GDP growth. Try that one on for size while having a world-class education. It will never work.
So, Alex, you're saying the U.S. is on track to having almost all the innovation growth?
Well, we're at 84% of the top 50 startup of tech people now. This is basically pre-AIP, pre-AI. What do you think is going to happen? Like, my company is worth between $35 and $40 billion. I'm pretty optimistic we're going to continue to grow and get bigger. Okay, at $60 billion, you are on that list. Okay, it's very likely we'll be on that list. Like, any one of the products we built would be the #1 startup in Germany. Any one of them, we have 5. Our least successful product would be, so it's like, and if you are, yeah.
Alex, you're one of the great entrepreneurs in history, a great startup investor. Now you're one of the giants. As we look at AI, what is the opportunity for venture-backed startups versus the giants?
I'm actually very aligned with the venture community. I spent all my life hating the venture people because obviously there's a lot to hate. But but I'm very aligned with them on like Israel stuff right now because they know it's a strong tech company and I believe they're a part of the West and we should fight for them. But the companies that are doing well or in intermediate and large are going to get almost all the value. And I would be very careful if you're considering going to a small AI company. Think about it a lot.
How do you feel about the big getting bigger?
Getting much bigger. I'm actually an economic progressive. So I think the real issue is, well, what do we do to take care of the people who aren't participating? But I think it's a fact that the big and the intermediate big are going to get much, much bigger. But I mean, so there's always a tendency, and you'll see this, what you'll see in the US tech community is it's like half lies that somehow turn you into a product that, don't make any sense. You notice that you're being a little more miserable, but they kind of work. Or you'll find people that bend their moral narrative, so what I'm doing is good. So I know what Palantir's doing is crucial to the world, especially on the battlefield, and I love the American GDP story because I, in all modesty, think there's not much good in this world without America being strong. Okay, however, it is clearly a problem for America and every other country that all the money basically is going to go to a couple players. And we have a societal problem. How do you make sure everyone else has teeth and health and education and things that actually give people an opportunity? That is a really big societal problem. And talking about like all sorts of things that in my view make no sense, like weird permutations of identity politics, is not going to fix the problem.
Alex, when you talk about America being strong, how does the U.S. win against China?
America spends less than 1% on AI in the military. In America needs to spend at least 1% on AI-enhanced battle systems, and every year or at least every 6 months, in my view, you should add another point. And then it's very important to look at which programs are working, which software is proven on the battlefield. Basically, in business, people forget a banality. You win where you're winning. You have to take the central blessing that America has, which is AI, and the tech companies that are in this space. You also have to tell some of these tech companies, you cannot work in America and with our adversaries. And if you do, we're going to screw you. And so, like, I'm very famous in America. My goal was to be anonymous and have enough money that important people like you would take my call. And so I messed up the anonymous thing. But you're going to have to fix it
for sure.
Yeah. So we're going to force people. Some of the people in the room will not like this, to pick sides. You cannot sell to all sides. And that's we have to stop the transfer of this IP to our adversaries. We have to increase the amount of spending in the US DoD, and we have to make sure that spending actually goes to where it works. And I'll say something that many of my colleagues, the hawkish colleagues, will not like. In software, it does not matter how much you spend. It matters who got the money and did it work. So, like, I'm constantly, like, I realize I'd love every European country to do 2% of GDP. I'd be even happier if 2% of GDP was actually going to things that worked, just like I'd be super happy if we really focused on that in America.
You mentioned Israel. You want the corporate world to be much more vocal.
Well, I want two things. First of all, the corporate world has set a standard by and large that they speak out on moral things. Okay, if you're going to speak out on grasshoppers and in every form, I'm against discrimination. I'm obviously would like a green-friendly environment. If you have a precedent of speaking up, and then the one issue of our time, you somehow say you don't have an opinion. By the way, I think Israel has every right to defend itself. You might disagree. But saying you have no opinion after you've had an opinion on every other issue, you look like an idiot. And no wonder no one believes you. You've obviously been lying about every other issue. Like, I know a lot of these people. Like, they don't believe in a lot of the stuff they're saying, and they'll tell you in 2 seconds in private. You can't say on this issue you have no opinion. You can say, hey, Karp is crazy. Palantir shouldn't provide the best weapons in the world. Yeah, everyone has an opinion. But to say you have no opinion, and then, there's all these discussions now. Let's increase trust. Okay, if you're obviously lying all the time, and you're obviously saying you have opinions that make no sense all the time, and then you obviously don't have an opinion on something that actually matters, why would anyone trust you? You think people are dumb? You don't think they notice that you don't believe the things you're saying? And this is corrupting every institution in the West. And I would tell my friends who they're like, now, if you've been in business and you've said for the last 20 years, I have no opinion, I only care about making money, bless your soul. You don't have to have an opinion on this. But if you've been having an opinion on every other thing, and suddenly you can't say anything about, I don't know, like on October 8th, and there's like anti-Semitism rampant, and you have no opinion, bless your soul when people think you are an idiot or you're a liar. And that's just how it is. And I'm telling everyone, it's like, you think you're safe by pretending you don't have an opinion where you do, and pretending you do have an opinion where you don't. It's not a safe position because no one believes it. And by the way, you will see that the institutions you represent get worse. People, of course, and then how are you going to go to your employees and just flat out lie to them? But you think you're going to get good employees? You think like Palantir over a 20-year period has gotten the best people. And I don't think there's any dispute about that. Like, Silicon Valley hated me. You know why they hated me? They're like, the circus cult leader Karp is marching people away from cockroach.com to helping the U.S. government be superior. Why would he do that? It's terrible. He should be supporting us. And you know what? They say the same. They're happy because, they have to pretend they're pro-West, but because I've beaten them over the head, or at least they can't pretend that they're on the other side. But in any case, we still get the best people. We retain the best people by and large. Many of the best companies in the world that have been built are ex-Palantirian. Some of them are in the room. Of course, you made a huge mistake, and it's going to cost you a lot financially. But that's your decision, and they all know it's true. But you can't. There's an expression in philosophy. It's called a performative contradiction. So if you say you're a relativist, you say all cultures are equal, including fascists and whatever. Yes, but then you criticize someone. There's the performative contradiction of pretending you have no opinion, or only opinions that make no sense, obviously, and then not having an opinion on these issues. You just look like an idiot, and your institution will fail. And you see this everywhere in the West.
We finish always with one fun thing. Today, one fit thing. Alex, the last time you and I had talked on stage, you were obsessed with cross-country skiing, VO2 max, use of oxygen during a workout, one of the best Axios finish lines ever in its interview with Alex on Run Like a Snail. What's your current fitness obsession?
Well, so I have this new theory. It's basically viewed as true by that if you can take your VO2 max to the highest quadrant in the quadrant below you, that is the most important thing you can do for your health. So I have a theory that if you increase your muscle mass, and like my VO2 max is like elite for like a 25-year-old, but if I go to elite for a 20-year-old, I lose muscle mass. I think for brain health, it's much better to be slightly older from a VO2 max and increase muscle mass. And that's where you get the optimal VO2 max brain health. And that's what I would encourage everyone in this room to think about.
And how do you get that?
You spend 3 years working on VO2 max, but it's very hard because you have to be incredibly disciplined to stay in zone 1 and do very technical intervals. You can look at how to do this. Just copy the Norwegians. They have the best. I mean, so you just, and then about 2 years in, you want to start doing real strength training. So not the strength training you do when you're single and you want to not be single or be multiple single, but actually making your muscles stronger and more flexible. And that's like bands and body weight exercises.
The people in this room who don't have 3 years, what's the one thing they should start doing tomorrow when they get back from Davos?
Well, run like a snail, meaning you run at the pace that you walk at, get a band, stay in zone 1, do that as much as possible, and you will, over a long period of time, transform your health.
Up next is my partner, my Axios colleague, Nicholas Johnston, who's going to be talking with our partner, Qualcomm. Thank you for coming to Axios House. Thank you, Axio Events. And thank you, Alex Karp. Thanks for a great conversation.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon. I'm Nicholas Johnson. I'm the publisher of Axios. Thank you so much for being here today. We are at the white-hot center of Axios House this week at Davos. We couldn't do any of it without all of you joining us, and we certainly couldn't do it without our partners, especially Qualcomm. Qualcomm has been a great partner for us. This is now their second year working with us at Davos. It wouldn't be possible without them, and so I'm very excited to welcome to the stage for a view from the top conversation, Qualcomm CEO, Cristiano Amon. Welcome to Axios House. Let me hand you this. We won't start with fitness tips. That seems like a tough act to follow. Let's jump in on generative AI. I don't think there's a person maybe on the promenade right now who's more at the center of the revolution that is happening. So I would love to hear from your perspective. Take us a step back for the big picture. Like, how is this revolution impacting people? How is it impacting companies? What is the life that you're living with it right now?
Very good. Look, we're spending a lot of time on this. We actually been very, very focused. If you look at what Qualcomm does, especially on semiconductors, is how can we create the computing system that can run those AI models? And we actually been really focused on something that we call on-device AI, because I want to go back to how we always thought about, for example, phones. If you look at some of the Qualcomm history in wireless communication, computing actually started in the mainframe, but, you saw what happened when you bring a computer to the palm of your hand. And I think that's going to be true as we think about the use of computing for those AI models. So the past decade, we've been really focused, can we create an engine, a computing engine, that you can run, AI. I think what we do in processes is really mathematical operations, and you have now the computing capability to run those models. And can you do this in a phone? Can you do this in your computer? And can you do this without compromising the utility of those devices, for example, battery life? And I think we are getting at a point that I think, sticking with that topic of democratizing AI, we're going to have a number of different models actually running on phones, on PCs, on cars, and it's going to go parallel to what's happening in the cloud, and it's going to change how we think of some of the user experience. The unique thing about AI in those devices, they are going to play a different role in what we see happening in the cloud.
Right, there's a lot to unpack there. I love the historical parallel there, from mainframes, computers that filled rooms, to computers that were in our pocket. I think we're in the same journey now. Is what you're saying is that AI would be used to fill rooms, but now we'll have AI in our pocket.
Absolutely.
And so how do we push that along? It's like to back to the point of this conversation, democratizing AI so it's in everyone's pocket.
Yes. So I think we're just at the beginning of that, and I want to emphasize that think about this AI, if this new way of doing computation, and think about those models, and there are many different models, actually a number of different models of different sizes. Think about those models that get better, they get trained well for a particular task, and you have that running now pervasively with you. I like to provide examples on the phones, and the reason I like provide example on the phones because the phone is your most personal device, more inseparable device, but it's not going to be unique to the phone.
Everyone can touch their pocket right now. There's mine.
Yeah, yes. Think about this. Think, for example, of a large language model. This is like a ChatGPT type model, and you have prompts and queries. And let's say you have a model that is very trained, for example, to be associated with something that you do on your phone, like texting. And as you write text to somebody, let's say you and I talking, that text could be a prompt to a model. And if the model is running on that free computing that you have on your phone, and this model is running and say, do I need to respond? And eventually the model will say, yes, I need to respond. You and I talking about getting together, the model's going to say, here's your availability. You and I talking about the vacation we have, here's the photos you want to share. Or think about photography, for example. You take a photo, you do that many times, take a photo, share. You have those models, there you go, like ControlNet. You take a photo, you said, I don't want to show this background. I wanted to show a background of a different city. You just change the background and you share the picture. And I think that is going to be a different way we're going to interact with some of the computing.
This is actually interesting you mentioned this is a topic that's come up at Axios House earlier this week, is that we're moving from a prompting model where you have to ask the AI to do something, where because it's in the mix it knows. A little bit of the democratization is an element of that. If the AI knows what you're doing, it's involved in what you're doing on your phone, it can assume, it can project what's coming next.
Look, there are going to be a bunch of different use cases. So I gave some consumer examples. There's a lot of enterprise examples.
That's the next one,
yeah, but I wanted to maybe describe a little different way. And some of the things we see. For example, if we go to the PC, it's very clear what's going to happen on the PC, and then it becomes really interesting when you run those things on the device. Think about the Copilot on the Windows ecosystem. They help you do every task. So you have that assistant that's going to help you do tasks, going to help do things that the AI is going to make you more efficient. On the phone, some of the consumer applications, the job of the AI will be to predict you, right? So you've been operating in a system, and now we're going to have this evolution of the user experience that the AI is trying to predict your every movement and know what you're going to do, and it's going to ask if you want to do that. Car is a different thing. Actually, I'm telling you, I'm super excited about what's happened on the car, because the car is natural language, just picking on that type of model. Natural language is perfect for when you're behind the wheel, and if you're just on the car, you'll be able to have a conversation with the car, and the car has become a new computing space.
So those are a lot of examples for people, a lot for businesses, but there's another thing here I think floating over AI is what it might mean for society. Right, like the impacts of this will be massive. And so how do you think of democratization of AI as society-wide benefits beyond just the person?
Look, the reality is every time you have a big technology transition, we will speculate a lot about what that will do. Will eliminate jobs, will create jobs. We really don't know. But I think there is this value of making technology more and more accessible. Like coming from Qualcomm, we take a lot of pride, for example, how mobile phones actually connect people to the internet for the first time. In many countries, especially emerging economies, how internet got access by people was through phones. It was not through computers. And I think that having the access to that intelligent computation system is going to have a significant benefit. Like one that I can think of is education. Today, you may have to go to training to do certain tasks. An AI could tell you what to do step by step, and you'll be able to do different stuff. I think actually there was a video I saw about something that Mark Benioff was saying about Salesforce, that all of a sudden with AI, I think what he said on this video, if you have a call center operator, the call center operator could also start to do sales and could do marketing enabled by AI. So I think when we talk about reskilling, there's a common conversation that has happened about creating new skills and digital transformation. AI may have an excellent role in that.
So we've done through all the what's and the whys. What's the how? What are the next steps that Qualcomm is taking to push this along?
Yes. So try to be a little bit technical to
this is a smart crowd,
but not too much. Not too much. So of course, for you to enable all of those things, what is really enabling some of those things we're seeing with AI right now is both the availability of data and computing power. And I think our job and core competence is on the computing side. And we do see the ability to get a lot of computation and do in a very efficient way, especially when you want to bring AI to a device. I always point to the phone. The phone is an excellent device to challenge our engineering teams and to challenge R&D. Because the unique thing about the phone, you want to do a lot more computation in your device, but you still don't want to make any compromises about size. It has to be small, has to fit in your pocket. It cannot be hot. You can't have to have a cooling system. You're going to touch your face. And the battery has to last all day. So, and you have in the phone, you have a CPU that is busy doing a bunch of things. You have a GPU that is busy rendering. And how can we create a new computing engine that at the same time that your phone does everything it's doing today can also be running an AI very pervasive? I think that's what we've been working. So we've been working on what we call an NPU. It's a neural processing unit. I think one of the unique things about Qualcomm is can we do this in a way that is incredibly efficient from a power consumption, and we can do it in the computation that we can run those models. So what is unique is in a phone, we can run models of 13 billion parameters. We show like stable diffusion that you can provide a prompt that you could create your 4K cats, somewhere. You can do that in 0.6 seconds. We're going to do 30 billion parameter in a PC. We're going to do 60 plus billion parameters in a car.
So let's spin this forward. We're about to get the hook here. Axios likes to end on one fun thing. In Davos, we make that one future thing. Tell me the awesome stuff that's in the secret labs at Qualcomm. We're going to be talking about at Axios House a year from now.
Look, I really like cars. I'm a car person, and I was born in the '70s, so I did grew up watching Knight Rider and KIT.
Okay,
and
I like where this is going.
And that's going to be a reality when you put a large language model in your car. You're going to have conversations. A car is going to be your pal.
Come by Axios House next year. We're going to have a talking car parked out front. Cristiano, thank you so much for being here. Huge thanks to Qualcomm for making this all possible. Stick around. We've got more conversations coming. I want to welcome our global tech correspondent, Ryan Heath, to the stage.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Global Tech Correspondent, but also co-author of our AI Plus newsletter, which I write with Ina Fried, who's up on stage next. So if you really want the comprehensive view on how to understand AI, not just the tech, not just the policy and the politics, but all of it, do make sure you subscribe to AI Plus. Now, coming up next, we have a member of the European Parliament, one of the key negotiators of the EU AI Act, and someone who, if you don't already know, you need to know her. So we're very pleased to introduce her. I'd now like to welcome to the stage a great friend of Axios and back on the Axios House stage, Eva Maydell. So Eva, a lot of people do know about the EU AI Act, but there's myths and there's some facts as well. So tell us, what is the most important fact and what is the biggest myth that you need to explode for people here about what this law does?
Well, you want me to dive straight into the AI Act. Okay, well, so I think in terms of myth, let's start with myths. I think in terms of myths, it's about that AI will hamper, the AI Act will hamper innovation. You probably remember me in my early days as a member of the European Parliament. I always like to say I'm a tech optimist, but I'm even more so a tech realist nowadays. And I do believe that the aim of the AI Act was not initially to necessarily propel innovation, but I think we arrived at a good place today after intense negotiations to say that we have guardrails, but we also have put in place enough flexible measures and other measures such as research exemption, such as the support for SMEs, for example, that were not initially foreseen, or enhanced sandboxes that were not foreseen in the same way they are today, in order for Europe still to have the opportunity to become a player.
And what was that original intent? Was it the EU missed out on the internet and social media generation of technology, so it wasn't a leader like it was in mobile, and you wanted to regain that global leadership? Or was it a sense that you need to sort of have a way to impose Western democratic values onto the technology? What was the driver?
Well, the latter, and this is part of the truth, I believe, that I wanted to share. The idea of the AI Act is to enhance trust, to make sure that AI is developed within our democratic values and principles and under certain quality standards. This is the notion from where we were coming when we first presented the law, the Commission presented the law, and then when the Parliament started working on it. We truly believe this is a way we can strengthen our democratic processes. We could make them safer, we could make them more secured, we can make those processes more transparent when it comes to technologies.
And what's the mechanism? Is it that you will audit these models and do third-party verification of them? Is it that you stop them from performing certain functions? How is it that democracy will be safeguarded?
So some of you have heard about the AI Act, but very often people do not realize that actually it works in a pyramid way. So there are banned applications, then there are certain applications that are high risk, that are considered high risk. And this means that not every application and work that is being done through AI is going to fall under the premises of the AI Act.
And
hence,
not to be negative, but what is banned?
What is banned is social scoring, for example. Yeah. Biometric facial recognition done by certain authorities is also banned. We do not want to have the social scoring that some countries in the world like China have. We will never allow that in Europe. However, we would allow biometric facial recognition just for certain instances. For example, if there's a terrorist attack.
Now, one thing that most people don't know about the EU, they know it's complicated, and the processes can take a long time to unfold, and we had a back and forth about this on WhatsApp a few weeks ago. Some of this law will be in place by the end of 2024. A lot of it won't be in place.
The ban part will be in place by the end of 2024.
The bit I'm worried about is the legal vacuum between now and 2026, when the final parts of the law are in force. So what is your strategy for dealing with that legal vacuum, as others, be it China, be it the Biden executive order, fill the space? Well, you've got this great law on a shelf, but it's not doing anything.
So I think the past couple of months were important overall in global governance, because a lot of companies that are in that space realize that there's action happening, whether from the EU or from the G7 countries, the UN process or others. So I believe many of the companies are actually already thinking in that manner. And I'll give you an example. There was a little bit of a uncertainty around some European AI companies, whether we should be regulating general purpose AI systems. But I truly believe that we have built the way of life in Europe based on those democratic values. And I truly believe that those companies would want to embed those values in the development of AI. And this is why they will start, I believe, using some of the indications and parameters that we've put in the AI Act already now. They will not necessarily wait until the very last moment. And on enforcement, just two more things I want to share. So first of all, Enforcement will be divided in between national authorities, and I would like them to beef up their administrations a little bit so that they're more prepared. But enforcement will be key, and this is why we have created something called the EU AI Office, which will have the expertise to support governments, but also in the same time have the expertise to work with companies and request from them the information that is necessary and the information that is required under the EU AI Act.
So a stick, but a very nice stick. Now, normally we wait until the end to insert one fun thing into our interviews, but I'm going to mix it up in this interview because my colleague, Ina Fried, is now live streaming on Instagram through her Meta Ray-Ban glasses, and that's going to deliver a very unique point of view, not just to this interview, but for the upcoming Sam Altman interview. So get your messages direct for Sam Altman ready and share that on the Axios Instagram account for everyone who's watching. Back to our regular programming.
Okay.
Now,
That was
Eva,
a surprise for me as well.
we like to keep things and people on their toes. Now, it is a huge election year, including the very complicated European Parliament election. 27 countries in 24 languages, 400 million people with the possibility to vote. How confident are you that new AI companies are ready to deal with the consequences of their technologies in that really complicated context?
It's a
You can be
tough
honest.
question. Yeah, well, I'm concerned, and I think it's good to be concerned, especially this year. But overall, as a policymaker, I often am faced with colleagues who always believe that what we've put in place is the right thing and our job is done. And I think our job goes beyond just producing a file, a legislative file or a report. I think our job goes beyond this because it goes into the interactions with those particular companies. And I would like them to think a little bit more about the social implications they have across society. And this year, their role will be highlighted in a way that it has never been highlighted before. This is why, with a couple of people, we are putting together something called the TechWise Council. We're going to launch it on Friday here because it was just an easy place where you can gather a lot of those thoughtful leaders in the space. And we would like to provide certain recommendations to those AI companies. What more they can do in order to help safeguard the most democratic process that we know and democracies know. This year's theme of the annual meeting is rebuilding trust. I very much hope it won't be the year that we're going to lose trust in our democratic processes because of disinformation, because of the inability to explain truth. I think we are all partners in that, and we need to think, this time it's not just about private and public actors. It concerns us both, I believe.
And now, one of the other problems is how you move from words, like having a policy around an election, into action. We saw big companies have hundreds of people working on elections and not get it right. Some of these AI companies have just a literal handful of staff. Do you feel you have people you can talk to in those companies? Is someone picking up the phone when you say, hey, we've got a problem at the European Parliament with what's going on here?
I see that there is a difference today compared to a couple of years ago when I had to pick up the phone and call social media platforms. They would pick up the phone, but the explanation would always be, well, we are doing this, this, and this. And I have said numerous times, I think you need to do a little bit more. You have a problem in that country or in that space. You should put some efforts to do a little bit more and assume your societal responsibility. I do understand these are companies for profit.
That's about butts on seats and cash, isn't it? You can't do it without those two things.
I do understand these are private entities, but in the same time, those private entities, some of them are more powerful than nation states. And this is where you need to have a societal responsibility. You need to be part of the social contract that we as elected officials strike with citizens in a way when we get elected. They do trust you with your technology, but they will no longer trust you if this technology starts starts basically going against our democratic principles. So this time around, over the past couple of weeks and months, I have seen a different response. But I would like now to see the actions following the response and the conversations I have had. And I'm grateful for those conversations. They were frank, they were honest, and it seemed like there's a genuine wish to do more. But we would need to see if more will be done. And I think on Friday, when we launch the TechWise Council, some of those companies are invited to participate and hopefully subscribe to the recommendations that the WISE Council that we've summoned will recommend.
And to get a little preview of some of those recommendations, or just to think concretely about what we can learn from the 2016, 2019, and 2020 elections and the social media experience, what lessons do those AI companies need to take from, their cousins in the social media world?
Well, I think we would need to think out of the box. I'm no expert, and I would not like to give any prescriptive necessary recommendations. But you could think how deepfakes are created, and you could think, well, that you would maybe not allow them to use the images of candidates, or your company will not engage in this sort of content, for example. There's ways.
Eva Maydell, thank you so much for your insight into how the EU AI Act and Europe is engaging with the new brave world of AI. It's now time to hand it over to my colleague Ina Fried and this under-the-radar guy you might not have heard of, Sam Altman.
Thank you so much, Ryan. As we mentioned on stage, we're trying this out. We'll see how it works. So I am live streaming from my Meta Ray-Ban glasses. This is a first for us, so this should be fun. It's been a busy couple months for you, Sam.
It was a busy year.
You got fired, you got hired, you
I
got
quit,
married.
I got back again. I did get married, yeah.
Congratulations on
much.
2 of those 3 things.
Thank you.
What does 2024 Sam Altman know that 2023 Sam Altman didn't?
I mean, a lot of things. Look, when we decided to launch ChatGPT, we thought it was going to do well, but we had no idea how well it was going to do. And we thought the models we knew they were going to be great eventually, but we didn't think they were good enough to resonate like ChatGPT and GPT-4 have. And so I think one piece of knowledge is that this technology, even with all of its current limitations, is far more useful than we thought and can integrate into our lives in a much more valuable way than we thought. And so now that we know that, as we think about launching the next much better models, we come with a different perspective. I learned something about important and urgent problems and not letting the important but not urgent ones fester. I learned something about board members. I learned a lot of things.
And indeed, do you think you're going to behave differently this year as a result of what you learned? Like what, you mentioned the technology. Technology clearly taking off faster. What, everyone's making New Year's resolutions. Do you have a New Year's resolution?
I mean, I have like the same vague ones as always, but I don't have here's the thing I'm going to go get done in 2024.
All right, well, let's shift to the technology. I've been covering Silicon Valley and tech for 25 years. I've never seen a technology that has advanced as quickly as AI is advancing. Usually, even, the dawn of the internet, e-commerce, the smartphone, those took years. You had early adopters, then you had, mid adopters. Yeah. This, everyone can use immediately. And you said yesterday that even you can really only concretely know what's going to happen a few steps ahead. But let's talk about those few steps. Talk about that bit that you can see. What can we expect AI to do this year that it couldn't do last year?
There are all these things that we can happen, and I'd love to talk about sort of all the specifics, but the general principle, I think the thing that matters most is just that it gets smarter. So GPT-2 couldn't do very much. GPT-3 could do more. GPT-4 could do a lot more. GPT-5 will be able to do a lot more. And the thing that, or whatever we call it, and the thing that matters most is not that it can, have this new modality or it can solve this new problem. It is the generalized intelligence keeps increasing. And we find new ways to put that into a product. We find new ways to use it. But that is the higher order bit. I think that dominates everything else in the importance, is that the overall capability of the model, its overall intelligence, its ability to do longer, more complex problems more accurately, more of them, that is increasing across the board. And that to me is one of the few things that make this totally different from any previous kind of technology.
And let's talk kind of this year, what we can expect. Do you think most of the gains will come from new, more powerful models, or the fact that we now have so many more people developing on the models for this year?
That's a great question. I mean, obviously it'll be the multiplicative factor of both, but if history is a guide for us, it is the more advanced model that is the most important step forward. So I think I would expect that to be the biggest gain again. But as it does get integrated into people's workflows in all these new and different ways, the productization is critical. Like we started off as a research company. Now we understand that we have to treat both research and product as both critical. And it's the fact that we can do both of those things that I think makes us a special company.
And what do you think concretely we'll be able to do that we haven't been able to do? Like, what are some of the limitations that you think this will be the year we overcome these? Not just you, Sam Altman, and OpenAI, but kind of the industry. What are some of the things that are on the cusp of being solved? Whether it's hallucinations because of better grounding, whether it's merging AI with company data or specific data sets.
So that's a good one. I think access to specific data and the ability to use specific data in a much better way for like more relevant, more like context-aware work. I think that'll get much better this year. I think there's all sorts of the current stuff that people complain about, like the voice is too slow and it's not real time, and that'll get better this year. I expect. I think where we're headed, and then I'll talk about this year, is we're headed towards the way you use a computer is to talk to it. The operating system of a computer, in some sense, is close to this idea that you're like working inside of a chat experience or an AI experience. And you get to your computer, and rather than go open a browser and type in Gmail and look through your emails or whatever, you might just say like, what were my most important emails today? Can you respond to all of those? I'll see these. Go find this thing there and send it there. So we're heading towards this new way to kind of do knowledge work. I think with every great technological revolution, we do get an opportunity to use a computer in a new way. And we won't get all the way there this year, but I do think we'll see people do more and more of their workflow inside of a language model, for lack of a better.
I was going to say, do you think, and I imagine this seems reasonably likely to me, last year at Davos, everyone was playing around with ChatGPT. All the CEOs realized it could create a buzzword-laden speech just as well as they can. This year, they're all trying to figure out how they do it with their business. But one thing, it's still an app that people open some of the time. By the end of the year, do you think people will be spending hours a day within some sort of AI assistant?
Well, some classes of jobs already do. Like programmers, many programmers already do that. And I think that's a reasonable advanced look at what may happen to more people. So yes, I don't know exactly what the format it'll be. I don't know if it'll I don't know quite what this new computer of the future looks like, or this new AI operating system looks like. But by the end of the year, I would certainly say it's a safe bet that more people are doing their work in one of these experiences. And it's not just this thing you launch a few times a day when you have a question or need your buzzword speech written.
And what won't we see this year? What are some of the things that AI will do down the road, but beyond sort of the robots taking over science fiction stuff? What are some of the things that absolutely will come that we'll want, but are more than a year away?
The single thing that I think is most important to me about what AI will do for us is help vastly accelerate the rate of scientific discovery, make new scientific discoveries increasingly autonomously. I don't think that's a this year thing. But I think when that happens, it's a huge deal.
And I want to talk some about human creation and the human creations that have gone into training these systems. Obviously, a lot of discussion around copyright and intellectual property. You've signed a bunch of deals, OpenAI, with publishers like the AP, Axel Springer. If what you've done to date of training on the open web is fine, why do you even need to sign these kinds of deals to license content?
What we're interested in is not data for training, which we could talk about later. There's some value to that, but what we really want is when people are using ChatGPT and ask what happened today at Davos, we'd like to be able to display trusted, branded, high-quality content at inference time. And that's been the focus of these deals, not training.
Okay, but when it comes to training, do you still believe that it's reasonable to train on anything that's publicly available?
I wish I had like a easy yes or no answer for you on that. I think it depends. There's many cases where we think it is. There's many where we don't think it's the right thing to do, legal or not. Like, for example, we respect opt-outs in the spirit of being a good neighbor, even when it's clearly totally legal for us to do it. And, I think that's like a good thing to do. Now, one of the tricks to all this, by the way, is let's say you are the New York Times or somebody else. We can respect an opt-out to not go like look at, train on your content. But New York Times content has been copied and inappropriately or not attributed all over the web. And so when we're reading the web, there will be New York Times articles not identified as such on random articles that say please, on random sites that say please train on my data. So to be able to like ensure that we don't, that we're sort of like a good neighbor, one of the things that we think is important to happen is no matter what we train on, and we'll try to respect it as much as we can, but the internet is a weird place. No matter what we train on, we don't want to regurgitate someone's copyrighted content. That feels clearly not good to us. And so we're working to drive that as close to zero as we can, and we have made huge amounts of progress with new technology there.
And that has to do with what gets surfaced in terms of how you train models. And the courts are going to settle a bunch of these. I mean, you guys are facing lawsuits, others are. Are you prepared to, if you have to, build a model that's trained only on stuff that's clearly public domain or licensed?
Yeah, again, I think everyone is convinced like my data is so great. We cannot imagine you can make an AI without the New York Times training data. Now, we're happy to include New York Times training data if the New York Times would like, and there are many other partners who want us to, but we don't need to. And in fact, as these models get smarter and better at reasoning, we need less training data. If you just think about your own experience, like probably no one in this room has read 2,000 biology textbooks. The 2,000th and first, if you had, it's not going to help you that much. What you want is a small amount of super high quality data and to think really hard. So huge amounts of data are going to continue to be important to us. There's lots of good ways we can get that from clearly like open domain data. And then increasingly, I think the models are going to think harder about a smaller amount of known high quality data. And if people don't want us to train on their data, no problem.
Do you have a model in the labs that's trained only on stuff that you have a right to?
I appreciate for sure the effort to get me to talk about a model in the labs, but we never do that.
Okay. We'll move on to another easy topic, democracy. OpenAI announced a variety of efforts just in this past week about securing democracy, working with other groups to help secure democracy, your own efforts. With so many elections around the world this year, including, of course, the US presidential election, how confident are you that OpenAI's technology won't be used by either campaigns or outside actors to influence the election?
It's one of our top worries for the year. So we put this stuff out. We want to get way ahead of it. We know this is going to be important. I think in any election, people are tempted to fight the last war and put their effort into what happened last time and try to mitigate that. My expectation, although it may be wrong, is that this time around there's going to be new challenges, and we've got to really be prepared in addressing those, and we don't yet know what all of them are. We have some ideas, as you mentioned. We published a lot of stuff yesterday, but we really just want to have a very tight feedback loop, careful monitoring, be willing to make changes quickly if we notice anything, and work with the broad ecosystem of partners to do the best that we can. But I'm nervous about this, and I think it's good that we're nervous about this.
And still, there's only a handful of people whose job at OpenAI is really dedicated to election stuff. Meta, TikTok, they have hundreds of people. They probably have more people than you have in your whole company.
I don't know the number, but we have a lot. We are taking this quite seriously.
But you only have 500 employees. You can't have
800, I don't know, 700. I don't know the exact number, but more than 500.
But you can't have hundreds of people just on elections, right?
Look, there are a lot of companies that have teams of hundreds of people that do less than teams of 4 people do at a competently run company. So I don't think that's the right metric. We will put a lot of effort into this.
You also announced a change in policy that allows OpenAI models to be used by militaries. Why did you make that change?
Because what we tried to do is say, here's what you can't use the models for, rather than here's this group of people that can't use it. There were parts of the Department of Defense that had, I think, super legitimate, super good use cases for our models, and a blanket saying, anyone whose address ends in .mil can't use this, I think is bad. I'm a very proud citizen of the US. I'm a huge supporter of liberal democracy continuing to do well. We don't want our models being used to make kill decisions, of course. But there's a lot of other stuff that the military does that's quite important.
And you've got some great use cases that you talked about, helping, prevent suicide by veterans. Obviously, if someone giving a speech at West Point wants to translate it into Swedish, that's probably not a high-risk use. Then you have stuff at the other end, developing a nuclear weapon, clearly against your policies. But there's so much in the middle. There's so much that is not building a bomb. It's not destroying property, which is another one you have that's not allowed, rather, but that could be really harmful. I mean, these AI engines are incredibly, capable persuasion engines. How do you draw the line of what a military can and can't do? And do you think that's the right place?
One of the things that we believe very deeply is that society and this technology have to co-evolve. We believe in iterative deployment a lot for the obvious reason, which is that people need time to gradually update and think and figure out what the rules should be. But there's another part, which is you can't separate the technology from the world. You can't just, even if you get everything magically right, you can't build it in secret and then put it in the world all at once, because the world is going to keep changing with each iteration, which means on those middle cases, I don't know what the right answer is yet, nor does anyone, because no one has really thought through and seen how the institutions and the world and society shift and reshape in response to this. So there will be a lot of things that we'll have to start slowly on and iterate as we go, and there will be a lot of middle cases. But we do want to support the US government and other governments too. And I find it odd that everyone thinks this is a big gotcha question where they're going to say, wait, are you saying you support the US government? And my answer is just yes.
One of the interesting things about this technology, I was having a conversation in the Congress Hall with one of your fellow pioneers in the field, is the idea, we've had past platforms. The PC didn't really come with a built-in set of values. The smartphone didn't really come with a set of values. Inherent in these large language models and other generative AI systems, you're making value choices, both in what data you train on, very heavily in the alignment layer, the layer where you say this is allowed, this isn't, how will I respond to this kind of question, what questions won't I expand on, and what questions will I say, sorry, I can't answer that. One of the interesting things is right now we have different systems in the US and China, but we kind of have the idea, and I think OpenAI's is, you're building a system for the rest of the world, right? Do you think we'll be able to have one GPT, add your number to it, that really satisfies that? Or when you look at a country like one of the countries in the Middle East, are they going to be comfortable with the kind of system you've built?
I think there will have to be some global standards. And one thing I'm excited about is the technology itself, I think, can help us do that. You can imagine GPT and talking to all of its users to really understand their value preferences, relative trade-offs, the nuance of that, and then doing something that actually represents all of the people that want to use this model. There will be a question of defaults. There will be a question of what the wide bounds of permissions possibilities are. What can you get a system to say? What can it never say? How much room do you have to customize it for yourself? And we'll see this at many levels. So there will be versions by countries, different cultures, individual people. And I think the answer there is going to be to allow quite a lot of individual customization, and that's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable.
And does that mean OpenAI is comfortable to go into, I don't want to pick on an individual country because my hope is that they all expand their human rights, but there's a lot of countries that don't, for example, respect LGBTQ rights. If country X said, in order to operate in our country, you have to change the way OpenAI's models answer questions about that, is that something you're willing to do?
I mean, if again, in this idea of a broad, what the absolute constraints are, if the country said, all gay people should be killed on sight, then no. We would say this is I hope anything that the world, the people of the world would come to as a principle would say that is well out of bounds. But there are probably other things that I don't personally agree with that a different culture might about gay people that, the model should still be able to say. And I think it is not we have to be somewhat uncomfortable as a tool builder here with some of the uses of our tools and not And again, there are things where I think we can just say we draw a line here. Absolutely.
But if I'm hearing right, you do foresee a world in which OpenAI's models might answer a question differently in different countries based on their values.
I would say more than that, it'll be for different users with different values, which, the country's issue I think is somewhat less important, but also
But a lot of
could be the
countries
case.
aren't comfortable with the users choosing what they get to. And it's not just the US.
Is the
and
question
China.
here like, will we respect other governments?
Will you? It's come before. I mean, Google decided not to do business in China because
Yeah, and there are
was too much.
countries where we decide not to do business, but there are a lot of governments who I think have different beliefs than us, where we can still say there's enough common ground here. We're heading towards a lot of the same values. Let's work together.
All right, we have a few minutes left. I'm going to move into the lightning round. Smart brevity, we love. When you returned, you said you were hopeful that you would find a good role for Ilya and that things would continue. Have you found that role?
No update yet.
So is he working at OpenAI?
I don't know what the exact status of that is. I love Ilya. I think Ilya is like an unbelievable person and researcher. It's, obviously it's a sort of a traumatic event to go through, but I'm very hopeful. I care about him a great deal.
Whether or not it was one of the factors that led the board to do what it did, one of the criticisms of you, and there were a few criticisms of you during that time, was that, there's all this stuff that OpenAI is doing. Why are you off, raising money for startups, building other things? Why aren't you spending 100% of your time on these big issues that are confronting OpenAI? Why are you continuing to raise money for things that aren't OpenAI and invest?
They are OpenAI. I think there was this misrepresentation, not hard to guess by who, but that I was like off in the Middle East raising money for this chip effort, and that it was somehow like a SAM project. It was like an OpenAI project that the board had decided was a clear strategic priority, and it's not a separate thing. So I'm not gonna go try to like fight everything in the press because you all will do your thing, and I respect that. But that was like wildly misreported. These are critical to OpenAI efforts. I don't invest much in personal startups anymore. I don't invest personally much in startups. I do support the ones that I invested in previous to this.
Things like with the AI pin and Humane.
Yeah. So that one's now gotten. I wouldn't do another round there because that's gotten way too close to OpenAI. But in general, if there's like a startup that I supported and they're raising more money, I try to like continue to support. But I'm not. I don't think of myself as an investor anymore. I have like some ongoing obligations, but like this is what I'm doing. OpenAI is what I'm doing.
I'm wearing these glasses. They have an AI assistant built in. You've talked a lot.
I find this very strange for what it's worth.
Yeah, me too. Who here finds this normal? Not seeing a lot of hands, but we wanted to try it out. I mean, I think that's one of the most interesting things, and this has come up around OpenAI. There's debate, should you release it publicly or not? I personally am kind of glad that these models did arrive when they did because, again, the rate of change is so fast. If we don't start getting our heads around it.
That was our thought. I mean, that is the whole reason we have the strategy of iterative deployment. And I think we've been right so far to do this.
Another question that is totally on the minds of everyone I'm talking to here. So again, last year the CEOs were like, oh my God, ChatGPT. This year, they're much more, how am I going to incorporate generative AI into what I do, into everything I do? Where do I start? What are some of the things you tell both the companies that work with OpenAI, or what would your advice be to the C-suite folks who are here trying to get their heads around AI?
One thing that I think gets missed a lot, so I'll try to say the less obvious thing, is using this for internal productivity at a company is a huge deal. Everyone's focused on how do I integrate this into my products and services, and that's all good. But I think, like, how can I make my internal workflow more efficient? How can I let my software developers get access to a fine-tuned model of GPT-4 on our own code base? It requires a new way of thinking, but I think that's like easy winnings for everybody.
Lastly, what aren't we talking enough about? What do you wish more ink was being spilled about, more pixels?
I think the infrastructure investments that the world is going to have to make to deliver AI at the scale that people want it.
And that is going to mean a lot more computers, a lot more chips. Which pieces are ready and which pieces are not?
None of the pieces are ready at the scale we're going to need.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me thank Sam Altman,
Thank you.
CEO of OpenAI. And I'm going to try and end our live stream. So thank you to everyone who tuned in the middle of the night, U.S. time, to hear us.